Hey everybody, this is your host, Robert Chazz Chute, out on the All That Chazz Stress Relief Podcast, and I have a question for you. That whole let's clear the air thing, has that ever worked in the history of the world? Rhetorical question. Anyway, on this podcast, we are talking about motivation and finding balance. Let's get right into it. I have quite a long blog at the allthatchazz.com site, so I do suggest you check out that for the details on motivation and figuring out what matters. Because the thing is, motivation is not all that matters. I am sick to death of so-called gurus who are just telling people to work harder, work harder, work harder. As many of you know, I wrote a book called Do the Thing, and one of the surprise chapters at the end, after giving people tons of tools to deal with stress, pain, time, and energy, and, getting more time, stealing more time, boosting their energy, getting their pain and stress down, all that stuff. At the end of that book, I actually slow down for a minute to give a surprise. And that surprise is, hey man, don't work so hard. I mean, I'm giving you tools and all that, but the goal is not to make you a machine. You are not a robot. If you've got 100% work efficiency, then you're not stopping to smell the roses at all. And that's not the point of becoming more efficient. The point of becoming more efficient is to have more time for family, friends, leisure. You want to get a whole lot done, but you don't want it to take over your life. This whole type A personality thing and working that hard, we are not machines. So please don't try to be a robot. Anyway, I get into a little bit of that on the All That Chazz site, so please go to allthatchazz.com. While you're there, you can download some books. I just recently revamped the site, so there is now a welcome video featuring my sweet, sweet face, and the affiliate links and all that stuff, so you can check out the books and, relax a little bit. Take some time to read. People don't read enough, but that is a podcast for another time. This week, I want to talk about a couple of podcasts that I listen to, and you don't have a whole lot of time, so let's be brief. Further to the point of you are not a robot, let's talk about Jeff Sanders for a minute. Jeff Sanders is the guru, mastermind, cool guy behind the 5 a.m. Miracle podcast. Wrote a book to that effect, and I recommend his podcast, actually. He talks a lot about being more efficient and fulfilling your dreams and all that good stuff, mainly by getting more time out of the day and getting up early. He does make a point in his podcast that you don't actually have to get up at 5 a.m. If the 5 a.m. thing is not for you, and if you're not getting enough sleep, it probably is not for you. You might benefit from sleeping in a little bit longer. You don't have to get up at 5 a.m. to get the benefit from his podcast. He has a lot of really great things to say. Has some interesting guests. I do recommend the 5 a.m. Miracle podcast. But recently, and I give a link to his show in the notes at allthatchazz.com, he did a very special episode. No ads, just him and the mic talking about his recent health scare. And the long and the short of it is he was pushing himself too hard. He's going to be okay. It wasn't super serious, but it was super serious enough to warrant an ambulance call, and it scared him a bit. And I think that's actually a positive thing that he shared, that it goes along the lines of trying to do it all and prioritizing. Because you can't do it all, and you do have to prioritize. And Jeff decided to prioritize his health a little bit more, and I think that is a great thing, because we want him around for a long time. He was already a pretty healthy guy, eating right, eating well, exercising, all that stuff. But he was just pushing a bit too hard. He talks about it at length in his podcast, and I do recommend that episode especially, so do check that out. Because a lot of us are pushing way too hard. Which brings me to the second podcast I want to talk about a little bit. I'll go into a little bit more depth here because this comes from a guest on the Joe Rogan Experience. It's a war correspondent and journalist named Sebastian Junger. And Sebastian is a guy with a lot of interesting experience. He has made some amazing video and done a lot of great reportage from dangerous hotspots around the world. And he talks about finding the balance between being comfortable and too comfortable. So there's a few things I want to touch on here. And let me give you something interesting that he mentioned in the podcast. After 9/11, the health authorities expected that they would have an increase in the number of people suffering from depression, anxiety. They expected to have more people going into the mental health care system. And they actually had fewer. And the big point here is that the human mind and body is very well adapted to dealing with big stresses. If you've got a flood, then your neighbors all get together and you start filling sandbags with sand and you know what to do. Or you all evacuate together, or you share resources, you cooperate. Big stresses get a lot of support in the community because it affects everybody. And one of the interesting things that Sebastian Junger talks about in relation to hunter-gatherer societies, actually, is that we are really well programmed to be social with 40 or 50 people that we know and work with cooperatively to common ends. And it's important for us to be part of that social group and be useful to that group. And if you have that, then your stress is going to go down. He gives several examples which were fascinating. How, for instance, people were very nostalgic about the Blitz in London after it was all over. And, they were suffering horribly, digging people out of rubble and dealing with fires and bucket brigades and hiding down in the tube, shoulder to shoulder during the bombing raids. And after it was all over, that's when the Depression hit. There was a euphoria, certainly, that the war was over, but a lot of people look back at that time as the best time in their lives, if they survived it, because of the cooperation and, I suspect, love that they felt. Right after 9/11, New York was a very interesting place to be, and there was certainly a great wound to the city, but also a great coming together, and showed a lot of heart. And I remember the firefighters at Ground Zero doing their work, and everybody was, "Hey, brother, can you hand me that shovel? Hey, brother, let me help you out. Hey, brother, I'm on your side. I'm on your team." Sebastian Junger's episode on the Joe Rogan Experience was my first encounter with looking at tribalism as a positive thing. So often we see tribalism in a very negative way. We see it Democrats versus Republicans, or your team is Microsoft versus Apple, or you're for the Seahawks and all other teams suck, and or you love the Cavs and all other teams suck. These allegiances that we set up go deep in our psyche, and we're genetically programmed to be tribal, and it's not always such a negative thing. And that really turned my mind around about things, because I always thought before that tribalism was all negative, and it's not all negative. You look at hunter-gatherer societies. I talked about, how we're programmed to be cooperative and be useful to a small group of about 40 or 50 people. A small village, a very small village. But there's a whole lot less stress when you have problems that you can take action on and solve. So, for instance, I've got this major tax bill that's hanging over me, and I'm working on getting rid of it. But I can't just take care of it in a morning the same way you would, get up in the morning and think, I'm hungry, let's go find some berries. The ability to take immediate action and solve a problem is a major stress reliever. I've often said that with my chiropractor friends, every time they get a little pop and a crack when they adjust a spine, they're getting a dopamine release every time. Just like gamblers, I think when they are pumping on the handle of a slot machine, really, it's getting happy brain chemicals, and they're altruistic and good people and all that, but there's something very visceral about what they're doing that is very rewarding to both them as well as the patient. In certain circumstances, I won't get into the details of chiropractic today, but there are studies that show, especially that it's helpful for low back pain. But like I said, that's for a podcast for another time. So, in addition to talking about finding the balance and finding your motivation and figuring out what your motivation is and how hard you should work at those motivations, I think I actually have an answer, at least for myself and maybe for you. I started reading a book by a guy named Jonathan Green, and he writes about writing. And I think I've got something from that I can apply to the rest of my life very specifically. So I said in Do the Thing that if you don't measure something, you can't improve it. And Jonathan Green, he wrote a book called Breaking Orbit. He talks a lot about tracking and the value of tracking and what are the variables that you can track. And just by tracking these variables, you can improve your speed of writing and improve your efficiency of editing. And I just got done a workout and my knees are a little bit wobbly, but as I was working out, I thought, there's a bunch of variables here that I could track. And, time, repetitions, sets, and even the intensity that I'm working at. There's a lot of things there that if I put that into a Google Docs spreadsheets, and I do recommend spreadsheets. Google Docs is a fantastic tool. Just go to Google Docs, sign up, and you can have all the charts that you want. And these charts will set you up for accounting or set you up for tracking anything. You can track food, for instance, food intake, exercise, what you do, when you do it. Think about the variables that are important to you. You don't want to track too much, otherwise you won't do it. But for writing, I track things like my mood when I write, where I write, when I write, for how long, and how many words I write. And those variables, when I look at them, I can identify when I'm most efficient, when I'm most energetic. And I just find that because I have an eye on the clock, I'm getting more done. Writers will also be familiar with the Pomodoro method, and you can get lots of free apps for that on the App Store of your choice. And that is basically a tool that gets writers to write to beat the clock. And it's a great tool for getting your first draft down, because the most important thing is to get the words down, then you can edit them later. So that's all about writing, but all those things like mood, time, what you do and how long it takes you to do it, those variables are useful for exercise, what you're eating, when you're eating, how you feel when you eat it. All those things can be very useful for tracking diet as well. And I'm going to start doing that for both exercise and my food. And I think by using the spreadsheets on Google Docs, I will be much more, what's the word I'm looking for? I will adhere to my goals and ideals much better when I can see it in black and white. because I have doubled my writing and editing speed just by starting to track it. So do check out Breaking Orbit if you are a writer. And if you are not, then certainly think about what you can track with spreadsheets. And if you don't try to track too much, don't let it dominate your day. It could actually be fun. So we're coming up on 12 minutes, and it is time for me to get out of here and get some more writing done. But thank you for listening to the All That Chazz Stress Relief Podcast. You can support this podcast like R.F. Casey does by going to Patreon, and that link is at allthatchazz.com. Thanks for listening. I hope you found something useful in this. I am not editing it. I am just getting it out there as fast as possible because I'm a bit behind schedule, and I want to get new information to you every week. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you liked it, do drop me a line at expartepress@gmail.com. That's EXPARTE press, PRESS, @gmail.com. Or just leave a review wherever podcasts live. Thanks again for listening, and go out and do the thing. That's the plug for the book by Robert Chute. Hey, check out that link at allthatchazz.com. Okay, I swear I'm done. And see you next week. Take care, guys.